Hi, everyone. This is Vince Leo. You're either tuned in here on Around the World in 80s Movies podcast feed, or it is the To the 90s and Beyond Film podcast feed. This episode is going to be the same on both feeds. So if you listen to it on one, you don't have to listen to it on the other if you happen to be subscribed to both. You don't even have to listen to it now, actually. It has nothing to do with movies. I will give you the TLDL version right now, which is the too long didn't listen version, because I'm going to actually expound on what I'm about to say in great detail after I tell you that the reason why I haven't come up with an episode in a little while, and I've started getting emails about it asking, what's going on with the show, is that I started a side venture. The side venture is internet radio station. I created one, and it's called Funk the Planet. And you can actually find information about Funk the Planet on my website for it, funktheplanet.net, or you can go to funkthepla.net. Either one will get you there. I have a web radio app there. You can listen to the station while you're on Chrome or Firefox or whatever it is that your browser of choice. If you happen to actually listen to internet radio, you could probably find my station on your favorite radio app, so you can listen to it on mobile or in your car if you happen to have a car that plays different apps. Funk the Planet is the name of the show. Check it out if you can, if you're into funk and soul music. If you're not into funk and soul music, I don't necessarily recommend it unless you want to be exposed to it, or you're just very curious about what an internet radio station might sound like. You can check it out. Funktheplanet.net is where to go. I have links to a lot of different apps there as well. So now the long version of this requires talking about my interest in funk music, but also my interest in radio. It pre-existed my interest in movies and pre-existed my interest in podcasts, because podcasts weren't around for some of my life. So beginning, why do I like funk music? Well, it started off when I first got a record player when I was 6 years old in 1976. And the first record I ever got for it was Songs in the Key of Life by Stevie Wonder. And I played that incessantly, probably, because it was the only record I owned. And I thought it was cool to have a record player. And I was very fascinated by it. I also started borrowing my Cuban mother's records. She loved disco and funk and soul and R&B, whatever, among other things, salsa as well. So I would play her records because I only had one record. So I got to listen to Ohio Players and Rufus and Chaka Khan, the Commodores, and a lot of other stuff. Donna Summer was popular. She had that. Rick James as well. So I played a lot of that stuff on my record player, and it just became the stuff that I knew and I was into. Sometime in the early 1980s, I started getting into hip hop. I was blown away by that sound, and I got very much into it. I became a huge hip hop head throughout the 1980s. Run DMC, Houdini, and eventually, when I decided to go to college, I was decided to do a hip hop show on the radio station here, KCSB, which is the college radio station for the university I went to, which was the University of California in Santa Barbara. And I did the hip hop show there. Even after graduation, I happened to still live locally, and I decided to just continue on with the show. And so I was just one of like 6 or 7 different hip hop shows at the time, and it was really hard to find my own little niche in there, and it became very time consuming, and I was giving up my Friday nights because I did Friday night 8 to 10 every week. That's kind of a prime spot to have, but also it didn't allow me to do much socially with my friends. Dating life suffered as a result because I couldn't really spend Friday nights with anybody. So I decided I needed to move on with life. I was approaching 30 years old. I wanted to do one more quarter of the show, just to do the type of music that nobody else was playing on that radio station or anywhere else on any radio station at the time. And that was contemporary funk music, stuff that artists were putting out that nobody knew about because it wasn't being played on commercial radio and it wasn't being played on our station. And so I did a funk music show. It mixed new funk artists, new funk and soul artists that I consider to be incredible, putting out great music, along with classic old funk music that nobody else was playing either. And I was very proud of it. So proud that I actually, instead of doing one more quarter, I continued doing it for another 2 years after that. But at a certain point, like I said, all good things had to end. in the year 2000, I decided to cut myself off from doing the show anymore. And I never looked back because I didn't want to miss it enough to come back and then have to go through the agonizing process of having to quit again, because it took me many years to finally hang up the hat and walk out. But fast forward 25 years. There's an artist I used to play on that funk music show for that 2+ years called Omar. And Omar is a UK soul music artist, considered one of the founding fathers of UK neo soul. What that means is just somebody who's making a kind of a classic soul sound, but for a new audience. Audiences that still loved soul music, but didn't really like a lot of the contemporary R&B. They like that old stuff. I consider him to be one of the greatest soul singers of all time. He is almost unknown, virtually, unless you're just really deep into the music in the United States. He just does not get play on almost any radio station around the United States compared to, Beyonce or, it's a very popular acts that are still doing R&B and soul music, but he just doesn't get play. So he happened to be doing an American tour, playing at small-ish venues. He decided to do one stop in Los Angeles at this very small but great venue called the Lodge Room in Pasadena, I think is where it's located. Being only maybe about 2 hours drive away, I decided that this was my opportunity. When else am I ever going to see this guy in concert? And so I decided to go to see Omar in concert. Great show. 500 standing room only type venue in Los Angeles. I was right there at the front of the stage. My wife was very generous with me. She's not really into the music like I am, but she got me, somehow she moved me all the way up to the front stage, and I got to see one of my all-time music idols. I love this guy and his music, and I've loved every album, and I still listen to him. I never get tired of it. Got to meet him after the show. He does a meet and greet for people who come out to see him. He's very good with his fans. And I got something signed. I got a picture with him, and I left on a high. I was so happy. Big moment for me, because I had listened to his music for over 30 years. Thought I'd never, ever get to see him for any reason. And here it was, and I got to meet him. So all that being said, what does that have to do with me starting my own internet radio station? Well, that experience made me think that here, I used to play his music on my show, so people in the Santa Barbara area, at least that listened to my show, got some exposure to his music, and maybe, I'd like to think, some people may have shopped around for his music. His albums primarily were not available in the United States, but, at that time, internet was starting to take off. And some people maybe did like me and bought his albums on import from the UK. Even since then, even though he's very well respected in the music industry, I mean, people like Erykah Badu and even Stevie Wonder did a duet with him because he loves his music. Want to work with him because he's a great artist, but he is not very well known. I read an article about him saying it's your favorite soul singer's favorite soul singer. He's very well respected by people who are deeply into this music. Yet there's no commercial platforms that play his music here in the United States, almost at all. And so it just started gnawing on me. I was like, somebody needs to play his stuff. Somebody needs to play stuff from him, and also all these other great funk and soul artists that are still making great music today that don't get play even on R&B stations at all. So anyway, I started to get that familiar itch again. I need to get back. I need to get back to KCSB and do a radio show somehow. The logistics are just not there for me. I have a family now. I don't live in Santa Barbara anymore. I live actually not quite in Santa Barbara, and it's just a time commitment, a money commitment, because I would have to buy all kinds of new records in order to play on the show. I just couldn't do it, especially for a 2-hour show, and I wasn't going to get paid. And so I thought, well, is there a way that I could actually do what I do here, like a podcast, but like a radio show? So one of the things I researched is, what if there's an internet radio station out there that is looking for talent that I could probably do a couple hours a week on? Well, in the process of looking at internet radio stations, I discovered that I could probably start my own station. The things that I have to worry about is making sure that I have a big enough catalog of music, which I do. I've got thousands and thousands of records that I've accumulated over the years in vinyl, on cassette, on CD. I've got my own digital collection as well of things that I've bought from the internet. I've got all kinds of music. So I never stopped being a huge fan of the music. So I have the catalog ready to go. The only thing I just need to do is to buy new music, new artists, and upload it. So I decided to start my own internet radio station, playing the kind of music that I think should get exposure out there. I've come to find that there are many funk music stations, by the way, around the world. But I've come to find that funk as a genre means different things to different people, depending on what country you're in. You know, if you go to France, a lot of the music is like G-funk kind of stuff. I love it. It's great. But it tends to be like that. In Germany, it has a different kind of connotation. In the Scandinavian countries, there's funk music. It's very popular, but it's still different. Bulgaria has a funk music scene as well. Very soulful type music. I mean, it almost sounds like American soul music to me. Fantastic. South America, Brazil has a lot of funk music. A lot of it is, to me, is just straight up dance music. It's not necessarily funk or funky, but it's called funk, and you can get that there. But for me, you know, my definition of funk is a lot of that stuff, the great horns and bass guitar and drums and stuff that came out, starting with James Brown, through Sly and the Family Stone, through Earth, Wind and Fire, through the Ohio Players, through Stevie Wonder, and all of that great stuff, especially through the 70s. A lot of the stuff that I consider to be actual funk music stems from that definition of it. Although, you know, I love Prince, you know, certainly I consider that funk music as well. I've come to discover, and in so doing research, there are many, there's hundreds of acts still doing funk music, not only in the United States, but all around the world, that are putting out great music that I consider to be just as good as some of the stuff that came out in its heyday, and they're doing it for the love. Their fan base is not huge. I mean, Omar has been doing it. He's been a recording artist for 40 years, and he still doesn't have a huge fan base, even though his music is, in my opinion, incredible. I have the itch. I have a passion. I need to get this music out there, because a lot of those other funk stations are playing a different style of funk than this funk that I want to play. So I decided that there is a niche there of music that is not getting a lot of exposure, even among people who are playing that kind of music. You know, there's a lot of funk music stations out there that are playing real funk to me, but they're playing classic funk, like the 60s and 70s and into the 80s. They're not playing like the contemporary artist, stuff that is coming out like today that is worth listening to. I decided I'm going to do my own funk station. And the reason why I called it Funk the Planet is because initially I was just going to go back to play funk music for the Santa Barbara area, but back on KCSB, but I decided I couldn't really do that. But on the internet, I could funk the entire world. And so therefore, that's the name, Funk the Planet. I'm funking the planet. I have to be careful how I say that, because it sounds vulgar if I say it a certain way. Anyway, that's why the station has been born. Thank you so much for listening to The Reasons Why. It is another passion of mine, just like the movies, just like the 80s movies and the 90s movies. Funk music is another one of my great loves, in addition to my wife and my child. It's just something I've just always been really into. I'm the funk music guy to a lot of people. And when I meet somebody who likes funk music, I can talk to them for hours, because we just go over all of the great stuff and we expose each other to a lot of the music. And I'm very much interested in this. You hear my voice on occasion from time to time. However, the station, because it's running 24/7, I can't be on the station 24/7. And I'm not making enough money with the station. I'm not making any money. I'm losing money. But to run the station, at least at the time, I hope that I get enough of a fan base in order to be listener supported. But I'm a long way from that happening. If that should ever happen, I would be blessed. So it's basically a catalog of music. They have something called clock wheels that allow me to set kind of like what kind of music I want to play at certain times. And there's scheduling. Like Monday nights, I do a Prince-based show, Prince and his associates, and other music that was associated with Prince. I'm going to be putting other shows on different nights of the week as well. There'll be like a New Jack Swing night, and there'll be like a classic old school hip hop night, and there'll be a neo soul night, and there'll be It'll go on and on. I can cut all of the things that I want to say on the air beforehand, and it'll just get thrown in there. And you'll hear my voice on some of the IDs and some of the promos. It's not really a talk show, and I'm not doing it live. If you're inclined, if you're a funk music fan, please check it out. funktheplanet.net is where to go for the web player, as well as links to finding it on your favorite radio streaming app. For those people who are still listening, and I'm always surprised that people do listen to the very end, if you are wondering when am I going to get another show out for the 80s podcast or the 90s podcast, well, pretty much the next show that I'm doing for the 80s podcast is Battle Creek Brawl with Jackie Chan. I got that 90% done, so it's going to be out in the next week or two. Matrix, I'm doing on the 90s show. I may have a surprise episode going back to the Jurassic Park series, because there was another Jurassic movie, I should say, that came out, and I did see it and I did review it, and I probably will talk about that as well on the 90s show. So good stuff coming out. I am getting now back into it now that the radio station's up and running and it is doing well. Primarily, I'm getting back into the research and the writing and the recording of the movie podcast that I have dedicated my life to for the past 10 plus years too. So if you're a fan of those, don't worry, more episodes are coming. You don't have to write to me that much unless you just want to say hello. I did get some from people recently. I didn't want to respond to them because I didn't want to talk about the radio station until I felt it was good enough to share. And I'm at that place now, so that's why I'm sharing. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I know I went on and on about this. Next time you hear me, we'll be talking movies for sure. Until then, well, you can listen to my radio station until then and have a funky good time.